Welcome, everybody, to our Sacred Self-Healing workshop or training call, Dimensions of Self. This is one of those typical training situations here for Sacred Self-Healing members. And if you're watching the recording or listening to the recording right now, then understand that this 1.5 hour training with me, my name is Jona Bryndis, that this is the type of discussion and workshop that we seek here within the Sacred Self-Healing community, namely to dive deeper into the self-discovery aspect and consciousness component of ourselves. There is no real science of self-awareness or science of consciousness yet, but one of the hallmarks here of the Sacred Self-Healing program is the systematic learning of self-awareness, self-discovery, and hopefully also self-healing. So a big welcome to all of you for coming here today. And as most of you know, these training calls are live webinars, they are live interactive workshops, which also means that there is time dedicated to sharing and questions. And so we want to start this self-discovery journey of exploring all these different selves, the true self and the false self and the ego self and the authentic self and the etheric self and the soul self and the divine self and whatnot. A very complex task, and we have a lot of slides here. I've tried to come up with as many visualizations as possible for you. All these are part of the Sacred Self-Healing steps, and I will also explain as we go how these steps relate to these different dimensions of self, or the different layers of who we truly are. So I wanted to start with a question, and you hopefully sharing how you're currently feeling about yourself. How do you currently feel about yourself? This is obviously about these different versions of ourselves. So if you are perceiving, say, multiple versions of yourselves right now, like a part of you is aligned to this or wants to do this, and another part wants to do this, then please share this with us. In fact, this would be a big part of the learning experience of this sharing, namely the fact that we typically perceive multiple aspects or multiple parts of ourselves that are either contradicting another or that are conflicting or that are just simply confusing for us. So let's shed some light into this. Who would like to share? What is your state of self right now? How do you feel about yourself? Do you feel in peace? Do you feel like everything's kind of lined up with another, and you feel very congruent? One of these words that we learn when we begin to look at some of the deeper aspects of ourselves. Do things match up in our life, or do we feel, very conflicted in the sense that we constantly have these different kinds of voices that speak inside of us that tell us, oh, we should do this, and I need to do this, and then the critical inner voice that scolds us or judges us for not having done this, or why didn't I do this earlier? Who of you would like to share?
Hi, Jona, it's Cheryl.
Hey, Cheryl.
I'm feeling pretty good. I have had a rough physical week. Some body parts weren't in the right spot, and that really tends to affect me on all levels. So, working presently with one of our members doing yoga to realign, and I'm always a bit blown away about when I'm physically not in alignment, how it affects everything. But I do recognize the importance of that, and 8 months ago, I wouldn't have been able to correlate those things together. So we're putting physical self like right up front in the last 8 months or so has made a huge difference for me. I have spent most of my life rejecting the physical, and being in it is new, but very much appreciated. And so for the most part, I feel pretty in balance.
That's cool. That's a very good intro into how we can perceive ourselves. We can perceive ourselves, of course, through our own thoughts or through our emotions or just through our physical. All this is possible. And I've just basically heard you differentiate, namely these different layers on which we are experiencing ourselves. So you just shared that you've had physical issues, misalignments, and that you are now beginning to make connections here that in regards to maybe other aspects of you that are related to this. So here in this slide, you can see that there are different density levels of our human existence here, at least on this planet and in this 3D dimension. And the lowest density is the physical. And I want to just confirm this for you here real quick, Cheryl. Anything that is going on in any of the other levels, especially here, the spiritual, etheric, and energetic level that are in the unseen versus the physical, emotional, mental are in the seen, that's something we can perceive through our senses. If unresolved, ends up in the physical, in the lowest density. It becomes denser and denser and denser if we have, you used the word, I think, misaligned, right? So can you just briefly tell us what you mean with that, misaligned? I mean, it's pertaining a physical condition, but what do you see here? How do you see connections to these other aspects of you?
Well, from a physical standpoint, I know when my hip and my atlas goes out, and it's usually from doing some physical thing that requires force, actually, which could be power. But so I've been working in the yard doing things that require a heavy physical presence, and that happens. And then I notice now I can really see how it affects everything: the physical, the mental, the spiritual, the etheric, the energetic, and everything all comes together. And it takes a little bit of challenge to recognize it and get back into a space where I am no longer lose connection, I think, is the easiest way to say it. Most of the time, I can feel all parts of me, including energetic, etheric, but when physical goes low, I forget, and then anyway, the whole stack falls down.
So what I hear you say is that you've noticed through the, basically impairment, the physical impairment, that you notice how this also bleeds through and affects these other aspects of you, or the other ways to experience yourself. Now, my question was actually the other way around, which I just realized. Okay, I was kind of hinting at how is that perhaps related to these other aspects of you. You said it's you overdid it, basically, right? I mean, that's what I heard.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it was fun, but you overdid it. So there was some part that got neglected, or you used the word disconnected. Okay, this is all basically spreading some of the breadcrumbs here that we need to put all this complex, these complex subjects together. Now, so you had to use force, and it disconnected you, all right? And the result is a physical misalignment. We could just as well say there might have been a misalignment somewhere else, or a disconnection somewhere else, and that then led to the physical misalignment.
Right.
From an energetic point of view, it is this way. Okay, but of course we all live in the 3D, and so 3D experiences or phenomena can of course influence backwards. So when we look at the deeper aspects of ourselves and energies and so forth, then we have to always see it as a two-way street. There's a two-way street, okay? The physical things that happen to us don't happen for no reason. A very good sort of self-healing or self-coaching tip when we suffer a certain physical condition is to ask ourselves, what am I forced to be doing now that I have this physical impairment? And that can allow us to reverse engineer what went out of alignment or out of congruence in the first place. What's your first guess? You
What
overdid
went
it?
out of alignment? Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I could have done something in a more less masculine manner, to be
Okay.
quite honest. I could have used my power instead of my force, but I didn't.
Or collaboration, asking for help, for instance, or
Yeah, yeah,
slowing
that.
down, or okay, this is cool. You're making a connection within masculine and feminine energies that shows that you have a certain level of energy awareness. Okay, and I have not included the masculine and feminine aspects of ourselves in this workshop here simply because it's another dimension. So when we talk about dimensions, I want you guys to understand that it's basically another permutation, okay? So they all interact with another. It's not actually two-way. It's like, I don't even know how to say this. It's multiple ways back and forth. And we can add the masculine, feminine, we can add time components, we can add consciousness components. There's many different components or many different viewpoints and perspectives that can add another dimension. But what I heard you say is that you could identify that there was sort of an imbalance inside of you where you gravitated towards one side too much. Okay, it just got out of balance, yin yang. Everybody kind of understands that, and that then had an effect on the physical, and then the physical had an effect again on the emotional, mental, and spiritual, and etheric. So it always goes back and forth. It's like a bouncy ball, really. In reality, it's like a bouncy ball until we consciously stop the whole thing and say, whoa, 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 wait a minute. Or until we have an accident or something forces us, like a physical condition, a 3D condition, to stop what we're doing. And in your case, it was the misalignment. Just sort of for the practical proof here, Cheryl, what did it force you to do physically? What did you have to do? Like lay down, rest, or stretch more, or what came up sort of as
Oh, yeah,
medicine, as entitled?
well, I'm a bit stubborn because I'm pretty sure with my yoga and my stretching, I can actually physically realign it because I have before. However, if I can't, then I will go to the chiropractor.
Okay, and
And
that's a
then I just
physical
had to
realignment.
surrender.
Oh,
Yeah,
surrender.
I'd like
Okay.
a physical. Yeah, I had to, actually, it just happened today because we're actually doing a yoga marathon and I haven't felt my true self. I haven't been able to feel my true self for days because I've been in this physical misalignment and it's affected everything. And today, finally, I was able to make connection again. And so now I am not in the, I will say, like mental or depressive state because I'm feeling so low. Now, spiritually and emotionally, and I feel myself again, if that my true self again. So I'm back in connection, and now I know that the rest of it will unfold because I'm not stuck anymore, if that makes sense. The physical will
Yeah,
come
totally. It
back
makes total
because
sense. Yeah.
I'm
So
aligned
what
again with true self.
so what was it that you had to surrender?
That's a good one. I just had to surrender the attitude, probably the whole the feeling that I couldn't connect. I had to just surrender everything and ask true self to come back. Not that true self goes anywhere, but I really had to call in the divine and say, I need help here. Like I had to surrender everything. And it's hard to explain the words that come with that, but I really had to let it all go. And now I can feel source again. It hasn't really taken away the misalignment, or the physical misalignment, but I can recognize that I wasn't willing to let go of the pain or the situation or however. So today that realization came, and it was like surrender all of it, and the rest will undo itself, even if I have
So,
to go to the chiropractor.
Cheryl, not to put you on the spot here, but this is such a perfect example. If you don't mind me asking one more question that
Okay.
helps you to actually put words to it, because that is exactly what this workshop is about. How did it affect your emotions? How did it affect your thoughts? How did it affect your spiritual awareness, your energetic connection? How? What went on inside of you? Can you retrace those steps? Because I know this is
Before I,
going this happens to all of us, and it's so good that you brought this as first example here, because it really exemplifies how this bouncy ball interaction here within ourselves can shift from literally 1 minute to the next.
you mean when I finally surrendered, or
Well, I
previous
mean,
to that?
no, yeah, previous to that. So, the things
Oh,
that you had
previous
to
to that.
surrender, the things that you had to
Oh,
surrender, what was that? Physically, was there pain? There was pain, I suppose.
yes, there was pain.
Okay,
There,
so physically,
there, there was, there was from a spiritual connection standpoint, there wasn't any. I haven't felt myself for like I haven't
well,
felt my
let's
true
go through
self
the
for
layers here
days.
in
Okay.
order that they're there, because this is how it grows in us. Okay, so
Okay.
you experienced physical pain and probably some kind of powerlessness, I guess, when
Yeah.
we are overwhelmed by pain, and the main way we experience this is like, oh shit, it's like this oh shit moment.
Yeah.
Right, I'm powerless. Okay, and how did this play out on your emotions? Where did your emotions go?
Uh, well, I as it built upon itself, then it was like a low grade depression,
Okay.
because I don't do well when I'm in, like, I can't sleep, I can't find a comfortable spot, and then I my go-to is anger. So then I get annoyed that I can't, and then I'd try to
Mm-hmm.
force these adjustments myself, and then this spiraling would get deeper, and then I can't think properly from a physical
Mm-hmm. Then
perspective.
yeah.
Yeah, it affects the way I think, and then I get depressed. I go low. Like I can tell right away when my, especially it seems to be my atlas, when that part of my physical self goes out, I can't think properly anymore,
Mhm.
and
What are
it's
the
hard to
thoughts that
find solutions.
control you then? What can you make an example for us? I know
Hmm.
this is like literally sort of going through this here. It's very valuable, Cheryl, that you share this with us. I know you can do this because you've done this before. What are the dominating thoughts when your physical is sort of in this oh shit place, okay, and emotionally you go low, you go depressed, you go angry, you go powerless, okay? What are the kind of thoughts that come in such states?
uh, I'm trying to separate the thoughts from the feelings. So
Mm-hmm.
the thoughts can be berating, like there could be like critical inner voice stuff about, well, you know better than that. What the hell were you thinking? You shouldn't have
Mm-hmm.
tried to move that by yourself, or those kind of things. And then the other stuff is, oh God, now you got yourself in this cycle again, and you know how long it takes to get out of this. And then this whole time I can recognize that I'm not connected to true
Mm-hmm.
self. And then I'm pissed off, right? Because I've done
Mm-hmm.
this and I've sent myself down a spiral. And so there's all kinds of chatter. But I would have to say, from the mental perspective, what really happens when this happens, because of the Atlas, I go into this fog kind of place, and I don't even feel like I'm in the
Yeah, let go
world as I
of
know it.
Atlas or whatever, whatever. It
Okay.
doesn't matter what caused it. It's just like this is the phenomenon. You
The pain
experiencing.
puts me in a fog.
Hmm, and
I'm not myself.
right, and so there's a part in you that recognizes that you're not yourself, but there's also a part of you that is always there that begins to dominate you, and that's the part here
Yeah.
that is really important. These parts are always there, okay? But say when we're balanced, when we are at ease, when say when there's no challenge, okay, then we feel sort of we have a status quo with it. There's a, sort of not too much chatter, inner chatter going on, or at least not more
Hmm.
than normal, whatever our perception of normal is. But it has an effect on our emotions. It derails us, and then the inner voices, the thinking. You described it as foggy. It typically becomes very sort of extreme. Okay, I mean, I can tell you what I think in those moments. I'm like, oh my
Hmm.
God, what if I can never ever walk again? Oh my God, I'm screwed. I mean, I can literally hear this. And when I go into the anger, it's like, oh, that's because I always have to do everything on my own. And why did I? And blah, blah, blah. So there comes in massive onslaught on narrative
Yeah.
that happens
Yeah.
when we
You're so
get it.
stupid. What the hell did you do that
Oh
for?
God, it just never
Yeah.
stops. And then, of course, that leads to even more sleep deprivation, right? Then the sleep
Yeah.
deprivation leads to even more fogginess, and you're like a complete mess all of the sudden, by something stupid like moving a bag. Okay.
Yeah.
And then you described it already. All of the sudden you feel all alone. You feel all like
Hmm.
disconnected. You're like, oh my God. And all of a sudden, now I'm putting words in your mouth, but I feel a little pressure with the time, so I want to speed this up a bit. All of a sudden, we no longer feel our spiritual self. We just really feel our 3D. All we can feel is our body,
Hmm.
and sort of this onslaught on emotions and thoughts. We no longer actually feel that there's anything beyond that. We're completely caught in our 3D self. And then, of course, comes, all the stuff that we normally suppress, the shadow parts of us, or the mean thoughts, or the thoughts of vengeance, or the thoughts of dreaming, escaping, can be part of that as well. Depends, sort of where we're at and energetically. But there comes a lot of sort of stuff forward that we don't like so much about ourselves. Yeah, we see ourselves in a place where we feel vulnerable, and it triggers literally all our security systems, right? We go into full-on defense with things because we feel vulnerable. And then energetically, if a person has that awareness, it's complete havoc. We're no longer in control of our energy. We can barely even so take a deep breath and feel our own energy. We're completely disconnected from the present moment, really. We're just all in the experience. We're not actually in the moment. There's a slight difference. We get to that. So it is, sorry for actually putting you on the spot here. Cheryl was a good example. Now, it's not always physical havoc that triggers it. This can also happen through emotional oh shit moments, like a breakup, or the loss of something, or the fear of something. Okay, anxiety is a combination of emotions and thoughts about the future. So thoughts can trigger this as well. Or excessive thinking and looping, and spiritual components such as I'm not good enough, I'm not worth living, whatever our spiritual construct is, whatever we regard as sort of the higher authority, higher consciousness, or source. You mentioned source. It doesn't matter how we name it, but we no longer feel deserving or we no longer feel that we have the right to to be alive. Really, this is what we then would call sort of a spiritual crisis. And etherically, we can also experience a crisis when we feel the onslaught of outer energetic bombardment, either undifferentiatedly, like through the collective, as we so often experience this here lately with all the COVID stuff and so forth going on. But it can also be directed. We can feel stalked etherically. We can feel that one particular person or one particular entity or whatever is pestering us or attacking us. Yeah, and we can also it can also be triggered by energetic mechanics or mechanisms, or dynamics is the better word, where we just completely get stressed out through absorption. You know, we get exposed or are in a state of constant exposure to places or people that are just really toxic. And even if we're not participating, it sort of rubs off. You know, we experience this osmotically, and the more energetically sensitive a person is, the more this can trigger all these other states or layers of being in how we experience them, how we perceive them. So it's very important that all these belong together. You said it in your first sentence or second sentence, Cheryl. Okay, they cannot be separated from another. We are all of this, and they constantly interact with another. And if there are unexpected things that happen to us on either of these levels, then we experience something like a disconnect in all its various forms, perhaps depression or anxiety or anger or physical ailment or a spiritual crisis or etheric attack. So that was the point here, really. And just so you know, Cheryl, Denise is sharing that she had a similar experience today. And you know, with not being able to feel her heart, to feel her true self. Yes, and Sheila is sharing that this happens to her often triggered through on the mental or emotional level. Yes, and Sheila, this is probably the most common one for most people. Um, you know, not all people, for instance, have this spiritual, etheric, and energetic awareness. That is part of what we're training here in within the sacred self-healing experience. Um, so they don't know really what it is precisely what precipitated those states. But either way, the physical, emotional, and the mental, which are the ones that we perceive through our five senses, those are the most predominant for people. And what we describe as going low is really, from an energetic perspective, becoming more dense. That is what we experience as going low. So it becomes denser to the point where we can only experience ourselves with the pain that we have. Yeah. Yes, so that is sort of one way of looking at these different dimensions of self, whereby these layers here are relating to an experience that has to do with our senses, okay, and our perception. When we look at the deeper aspects of ourselves, okay, they all contain all these layers. Okay, so this is adding another dimension always means that the previous dimension is included in the next dimension. Okay, one dimension below this version here would be to look at masculine, feminine energies and so forth, which we do as well. But it just gets too complex at some point. Most of our brains are really not designed to even, you know, experience and have a clear feeling for these upper 3 density levels here. So what we are about to talk about is going to be a big mind twister for you, hopefully, because at some point your mind will try to master all of this and will try to force this, and this will not work. And then hopefully you get to a place that Cheryl just described as surrender, where you say, okay, let me just turn off my intellect here for my rational thinking for a moment, because that seems to be too limited. Let me just feel into this. So I want to ask you guys to feel think here for the remaining time of this workshop. I want to ask you another question, namely, what it is with all these few vocabulary words that we already threw into this here, how you define yourself, and in particular your higher self. What defines your higher self for you? And it doesn't have to be a perfect a rendering of some kind of teaching, okay? This is, I'm literally asking for your subjective experience, or your subjective way of seeing this. What do you see as your higher self? And this could be just through the experience what your lower self is to you, however you define this. You know, a lot of people define themselves by what they're not.
Jona, this is Sheila. Hi.
Hey, Sheila.
Hi. Um, I guess you've already said it's hard to describe or define, so not doing that. It's more of a feeling for me. And it's a connection that is, it's a deeper thing that, again, there's no way to describe it exactly. It's just something like a knowing. That's the best way I can describe it
Okay.
for myself. That is like, there's no chatter, there's no questions, there's just, you just know in this deep pit part of, my heart or stomach area. And that's kind of how I describe it for myself, or I
Does
know
it feel good or bad, or like what does it?
it.
I mean, it's something.
It doesn't.
Yeah, go ahead.
It doesn't have. It doesn't define itself like a good or bad. It's like a neutrality, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, it doesn't even. So what I can tell is different is it doesn't take me high and it doesn't take me low, if that
Okay.
makes sense.
No, it makes a lot of sense to me. I like how you
I
say
don't.
this. Most people, for everybody here, define their higher selves as some kind of higher expression of themselves, or a more perfect self, or a more effective self, or a higher performing, like the peak self, or whatever it is called in success coaching. All right. So most people that you ask will say that they experience, or they would describe their higher self as a better version of themselves. Okay. What you
Mhm.
just gave us was a more aware rendering of that. You didn't judge it anymore. Like you said, it's more neutral. It's if I hear this correctly, Sheila, really what you're saying is that it's a state of peace somehow, because you
Right.
you mentioned this inner knowing, and Denise is adding here sort of yes, also knowingness. A lot of people add knowingness here, the feeling of belonging, like feeling part of something, feeling connected with something beyond oneself, and all encompassing. So it's somehow, I think, if we would just put all this together, somehow greater. It's a greater self, right? It's not
Right.
apparently the self that we are operating with here, like say the you part that is talking right now, or the me part that is talking right now, right? Because I mean, we have all kinds of things going on in our head when we share in a webinar, right? First we have to get all the courage together, and then we have to coach ourselves through this,
Right.
and this is obviously not our higher self, okay? Because if it was our higher self, like you just defined it, okay, there's just a knowingness and everything is fine and perfect the way it is, right? So what I want to point out with this is that yes, we have a sort of an idea of our higher self, but Sheila, what do you think that, and this is just sort of a guesstimate, there's no right or wrong, how often you actually in that place or state or in that higher self of yours? Or is this something you're striving for, something that you
Oh,
aspire to become?
yeah, it's definitely more than it used to be, more often, because of kind of striving, I guess, if you will, to get familiar with that. And so now it's recognizing when I'm there and I can feel that versus when I don't. And so
Okay.
defining that as like higher self in a past description would have been a lot of fluffy things about how awesome I am or something. Like that would be the most awesome Sheila ever is the higher
Thank
self,
you.
right?
That's exactly what I meant earlier, because this is really, I mean, as a, like, say, teenager or 18-year-old, right? 18-year-olds
Right.
always know everything, right? We think we are completely higher self. Yeah.
Correct. And so knowing that that's not what that is anymore, it made it harder to define in words because, again, using my brain and my ego mind and all those words um, puts that different. And so describing that feeling of that centeredness is different. So it feels like it comes down. And you and I have talked about that before and how hard that's been for me to adjust to because for me, coming quote unquote down from that level
Hmm.
made me feel like I was going low or being almost depressing or whatever, when really it was because I was staying way too up there into this projection thing, I
Mm.
guess.
Which you
Yeah.
now know is not what higher self defines. That was more
Correct.
sort of
Right.
like an idealized version of yourself. Is that
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
something that would fit that? I think
Yes.
that fits really well. And I liked
Hmm.
how you said it earlier, where it's neither perceived, you know that you're in your higher self, or that you're in that place when you no longer feel better or worse in that way. There is no
Hmm.
judgment about that. There is no payoff in that either. You're
Hmm.
not feeling super special or super awesome either.
Yeah.
It just
Right.
it's more like a peaceful state, and I can really work with this here. This is also how it feels for me.
Hmm.
Okay, it feels very wholesome. It feels like there's nothing missing, right? I mean, that's
Yes.
how I can best tell if I don't feel like I need anything. I'm
Hmm.
just, it's like perfect the way it is. Yeah,
Hmm.
wonderful. Thank you, Sheila.
Sure.
Any other definitions of higher self, or how you see it, how you perceive it, how you want it, different perspectives? Or maybe you have had insights about what your higher self is not. Maybe what you thought your higher self was and what it's not. Because I can tell you about myself that I went through probably 100 versions of different kinds of selves, thinking that those were my higher selves, only to find out, no, no, that's not it. So do you guys, give me a hand sign, do you guys find that the definition that we are came up with here together with Sheila, and some of your comments is a good way to work with? Is that something that we can work with? Okay, then let's just work with it. Okay, and see, as we are exploring those different dimensions of self, how I don't want to say the word accurate, but how close we are to sort of what could define our higher self. So we're looking at something here that is obviously not the result of any kind of scientific or peer-reviewed research, but it is something that I can see working with people on all these different levels and in all these different dimensions of self that could probably sort of show a little bit of the journey, those different versions of self that we aspire to and that we are growing into. We are evolving into these different dimensions of selves on our journey. And there is, different layers and different sort of sub-dimensions to that. We can add a temporal component to it here. We could add the past, the present, and the future self to it. We could add sort of psychological aspects, shadow aspects to this, the false self, the ego self, and the etheric self. And there's so much more in between this. I don't want to further confuse you. The main point that I want to make is that all of these together, all of them, okay, that could be seen as the higher self. And I think if we take the definition that we came up with here with Sheila, then that can still hold, okay, because there's a piece perceived, and that piece sort of signifies that there's no contradiction or no conflict between any of these versions of self. In energy work, this state of congruence or authenticity is often called unified, okay, or oneness. There's a sort of experience of inner oneness. So let's investigate this a little more here. Those graphs that you see here are all part of the workbook in the Sacred Self-Healing program, so you don't need to screenshot them or anything. You get them with the recording of this webinar, and they're also in the steps. What do we perceive as unwhole, as the opposite of this inner peace is when we are fragmented within, when there is a disconnect, I shall use this word in the beginning, there is some kind of maybe contradiction, or there's a pattern where we get stuck in. Shell, you mentioned this as well, stuckness, okay? And there might be sort of a conflict between who we truly are and what we want, okay, our higher vibratory understanding and our goals, but then with what is actually expressed, what we actually bring into this world here, how we show up, all right, and then adding sort of the social and psychological dimension to this, the things that we don't like about ourselves, and the way we interact with others, and aspects of the past, our inner child, our trauma, our karma, and so forth. So you can already tell this is very complex. We are very complex. We are very complex, but this is here basically sort of a simplification and a visualization of what is actually contradicting inside of us. Okay, it's the different fragmented parts of us. All right, and then what would be the opposite state of this experience of inner fragmentation or inner confliction, misalignment, incongruence, no matter how you want to call this, is when it's all aligned with another, when our true self and all these different aspects of ourselves, when they somehow sort of work together, when they are all connected with another. And you see here it's called the healed energy body, simply because there's no confliction. And when something is in alignment, when something is in balance, then we speak of healing. In fact, healing defined as sort of bringing that which is previously disconnected back into connection, gluing it back together, or bringing it into a more whole state, is something that allows us to look at healing more from a perspective of balance rather than a perspective of, like, say, insufficiency. So I'm sure you guys are all aware of this. The way we use the word self-healing here in context with sacred self-healing is not based on imperfection or being flawed, but it's based on increasing the level of balance and inner harmony and ultimately peace. All right, so that is then what defines the state of our being. And if you just follow me here, I have created all these slides for you so you can go back to them. Said the state of being is the product of self-awareness through conscious inner reflection on how I am feeling, what I'm sensing, what I'm emoting, what I'm thinking, what my unmet needs are, basically the state of well-being or unwell-being, and how we are relating to ourselves and the world in general. This is something Cheryl and I did together here in this first sharing. We investigated her state of being, or the one, I guess, the state of yesterday's being, before she shifted something today. So then we've had already the encounter with the word perception. So perception is just generally defined as the way I experience reality. It measures how reality affects me. It's basically the first person experience. It's my perspective. It's my experience. It is determined by my ability to observe the phenomenon. The PMA is present moment awareness. We'll look at this. So phenomenon is just what is, what happens. Okay, so like pain in my back, or low emotions, or anger, or berating thoughts, or not feeling connected. Those are all phenomena. Okay, so this is just something that is happening. Okay, and it delivers a sort of an impression, a signal to us that something is going on. Then the self-awareness level to describe the experience, that too we've practiced here through the sharing. If there is no descriptors for our experience, we've learned this in the emotional processing workshop, then it is very difficult for us to process what we're experiencing, because we cannot really label it, all right? And that is then can lead to repression, or, incomplete processing, and some other conditions. But it is the self-awareness level that allows us to describe the experience, and that's then ultimately what determines our perception. Okay, then it is determined by my frame of reference. The frame of reference brings in morals or values. Okay, that which leads to an immediate sort of judging of what I'm experiencing. Okay, so let's say I stumped my toe, and there's many different ways of perceiving that. There could be something that was in the way, and somebody else put this there, and in your frame of reference was that it wasn't supposed to be there. Why is this so messy here? Why does she always put this there? She shouldn't be doing this. It's her fault. Okay. Or you could perceive it as like, oh my God, I didn't pay attention. I was so whatever, fixated on thinking about something else, that this is happening to me because I wasn't paying attention. Or you get caught in like, why is this happening to me? All the misery in this world always happens to me. There's something about me that constantly pulls in such experiences. Or another variation of the experience of stumping my toe could be, oh my God, this must be karma. I'm getting punished for something that I did earlier. and then you feel reminded of what it was that you did earlier that somehow perhaps didn't really match up with your integrity or your values, and you see this as a form of punishment. Okay, and another rendering of that is, oh my God, this must be a sign. This must be a sign that I'm supposed to do something, or this must be a sign I'm not supposed to go there, or you know, do you guys can you guys follow me here? The way we perceive things has a lot to do with our frame of reference. Okay, because it frames the experience. Okay, then we have the willingness to look at the phenomenon from a different point of view. That is also determines our perception. Okay, so there could be whatever construction going on at your house, and there's just an overall chaos, or you're moving, or you know, things are just not in the same place as they always are, and you know, you just I didn't expect it to be there. It helps you, you know, to look at it from a different point of view and say, oh, okay, yeah, I get it. It's so chaotic right now, and I accept the fact that it's so chaotic. Or you know, somebody is doing something and had to put whatever you stumped your toe on uh, uh, down because they were holding something else. Okay, so it gives you a different perspective on what you're experiencing. Then your perception of the experience can also, or is also, determined by your empathy. To witness it from a different perspective, that would mean to not just shift your point of view, but also to look at it from the outside, or look at it through another person's eye, or walk into somebody else's shoes. Okay, and then it's also determined by our consciousness level, that in general allows us to contextualize everything that I see, that I experience, that I observe, in a way that we call it witnessing, where you see the larger context. You see the bigger context. Okay, so yes, I'm making this very complicated, but it's the point about that I want to make with this is that our perception is an extremely subjective, extremely internal experience of reality, which is measured by how reality affects me. And consciousness and empathy and willingness, and you know, sort of you know, our frame of reference, and you know, being able to change our frame of reference, being able to have more self-awareness, these things can drastically change the way we perceive reality, and with it also the way reality affects us. We can take different examples, bigger examples, such as the COVID situation. There's many different ways to look at it. We can, for example, look at it like we did with Cheryl's condition. Does it force me to do? What does this phenomenon, this condition, force me to do? Maybe there was something that I did before that wasn't good for me, or that was inauthentic, or that created a lot of confliction in me. And now that I'm forced to not be able to do this anymore, it's actually better for me. It's actually something that helps me to increase, or to better my state of being. Okay. Obviously, this has a lot to do with the way we perceive ourselves, and the way we perceive the world that we're in, how we perceive others in it. And many of you are familiar with this. I often use this chart here in the Sacred Self-Healing Workbook to show different states of awareness, and then the resulting different consciousness levels with it. And without going deeper into this, if you just focus here on these two columns here on the outside, how we see ourselves and how we see others or the world, okay, you can see that, for example, again here, this is why the example, the sharing that you did, Cheryl, was so valuable for me, because I can literally use it as an example here for every exercise or for every slide. It's like when we're in pain, we feel powerless and hopeless somehow that we could do anything about this, and this can then get trigger all kinds of things in us. But the point is that when we are not in truth, and we will learn what this is here in the remaining minutes of the workshop, then it's very difficult for us to get out of these states, okay, that are mostly defined as sort of low or negative states, okay? We feel that the world is threatening. We have a pessimistic attitude towards the world. This can go as far as, feeling like we're not really living our lives, we're not really participating in our lives. Life just happens to me, okay? And with the discernment of truth, then come new experiences and new perceptions, and we begin to be able to, due to the willingness that we have, due to our empathy, due to our consciousness, to reframe and recontextualize what we're experiencing in a much more optimistic or hopeful or courageous way. We begin to feel much more in tune, much more connected with the world, with our life, and with other people, which can then literally sort of lead us to experiences where we just that we just describe as peaceful or beautiful or blissful or grateful. All right, and so I want to point out with this here that the way we perceive things has to do with all these different aspects and dimensions of ourselves, and if we are not fully aware of it and don't really reflect on that on a regular basis, then it can become very, very difficult for us to recognize what we perceive, and especially here in conjunction with self-healing, if what we're perceiving is true. So the discernment of truth has a lot to do with knowing sort of as which self we are currently operating. Does this make sense to you guys? How I'm sort of bringing this all together? The awareness about which of myself, as whom I am operating here or experiencing my world or the phenomenon, is what determines how I perceive it, and vice versa. So let's practice this here with another question to you, or like sharing, asking you for your observations, your personal, your subjective observations in your life. What influences the way you see yourself the most? The way you see yourself or the way you perceive yourself the most? What have you observed so far? Cheryl shared with us that her physical condition is one of the major determinants of how she feels about herself or how she perceives or sees herself.
Hi, Jona.
Hi.
Hi. I would like to say that I think for me it's like the external world and how that kind of mirrors back on me. I mean, it's less so now than it was in the past, but the way that I would see myself most was through the way I saw the world around me and how people were treating me, and I wasn't very conscious of how that all kind of is a feedback loop that's not always very healthy. Yeah.
So do you remember, or is this still like present right now? Is it like that you seeing yourself through the eyes of others? So is it like that you are basically perceiving yourself through what you
So
see the others see you as? Is that how that goes?
yeah, I suppose so. An example would be if someone was happy with me, then I would be happy with myself. If someone was upset with me about something, or I thought that they were upset, then that would make me feel bad about myself. Very black and white, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the black and whiteness, that might be problematic at times. I mean, you've identified this for yourself, that there was some kind of imbalance about this, but in general, I can confirm and reassure you that this is very normal, very human, because we're designed that way. Our nervous system is literally designed this way. Okay, we have all kinds of things built into our physiology. We even have mirror neurons, neuroplasticity. The way we are structured, to learn and to gain feedback about ourselves happens through the responses through the outside world, through the reflection from the outside world. So that part is normal, and it's good that we do, right? Because especially when we get a little older, we can see how often we could get stuck in a certain version of ourselves, right? It's kind of good that we get reflection from the outside sometimes, right? So it's not bad. That is not bad. It's just when we begin to define ourselves through what we think other people see us as, because then you're not really in control of that, right? I mean, we're never in control of what other people think about us. I mean, if you with somebody, you just referred to work situation primarily, I suppose, right? If you have total jerks that you work with, let me just call it out that way, that need to make you feel small so that they can feel better about themselves, right? Well, I mean, then you never really know who you are, right? Because you made your identity depend on how they see you, or how they make you believe how they see you. It's very tricky, okay? I really want to show the complexity and the trickiness of this, because when it comes to our personal perception, we can never really be sure when we see ourselves through the eyes of others only, okay, who we truly are. Because you have them there as well, and they have their perception and their ego, and their agendas and their morals and their values and their frame of references as well. But what I heard you say was that you're already aware of that, and that this is becoming more balanced now. But that's a very valid point, and at some point in our development, when we are younger, especially when we're teenagers, that is how we learn to define ourselves first, through the feedback from others, how others see us. But there are conditions such as codependency and so forth, where we make our entire perception of self depend on that, and that can then make us subject to abuse, okay? Because it's very easy then to make us feel bad about ourselves. Thank you for sharing, Abigail. Denise is sharing that self-care, the level of self-care that she has for herself, can influence the way she feels about herself the most, or in strong, and it can be impacting a lot. The space. Oh, did you mean personal care, as in like somebody caring for you? Is that what you mean with personal care? No, you meant self-care. But there's another kind of a way how we can be influenced about ourselves, and that is by how other people care. If nobody cares, it can be really difficult for us also to not care, or to care for ourselves. Heather sharing that the experiences that show up in your life is how I see myself. So what I hear you say with this, Heather, is that you see the manifestations in your life as a mirror of who you are or what your current state of being is. Is that like who you identify yourself with, or is that more like informing? Do you mean this like it's informing you or signaling this to you, what your state of being is, or your energetic state? Is that what you mean?
I'm not entirely sure I can put that into words. It just makes sense to me. It made sense when I wrote it out. But I can tell you that I have a really hard time seeing myself as in my 3D. Like, you know, the way I would see you if I were to look at you. You're a woman, you're blonde, you're a human being. But when I look at myself, it's odd, but I don't see those things. I have to really practice. I have to really practice. But in my mind's eye, I do not see myself as that. So it's a very interesting thing to try to put into words. But for myself, I've always gauged, I guess, who I am, where I'm at in life, and so on by the experiences that show up in my life. So if I were to have a loss of a job, I would always say something like, what have I done to make this happen? And I would unpack that and go through that step by step in my mind. And then I would say to myself, now, why did this show up in my life? Where am I at in my life that I would have to have that learning lesson? So I guess it's
what would this play into, Heather? I mean, where would this go? I mean, does this go in the sense of like a competency where you're not good enough? You know, or
it all depends. Yeah, it all depends. So I can't say it's a this or a that, because it depends on the influences and the surrounding factors. Sometimes that would be yes, and then other times it would be not even related to that. It would be more like, okay, well, right now I need to learn how to communicate better with my son, or I need to learn that when my dog does this twitch, it means he's hungry, and it's really that dynamic, and it's really that in depth. It's like every step I take for myself is a learning lesson, and that's how I navigate through with my higher self to get to the next level, which is what I think is goofy. Get to the next level, always try to level up. And
yeah, but what I hear you say, Heather, is that you try to make connections. You don't just look at the phenomenon, like say you lost a job, okay, and oh my God, this is the end of it.
I wish I could.
There is a sort of another. There's always different dimensions of yourself that are bleeding through.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's part of your empathy. That's part of your awareness level. Okay. This is something that we can not undo. Okay, I noticed. You know, it's sometimes I wish, I don't know if you've had something like this too, Heather. I wish I could be as innocent and ignorant as I was when I was a kid. Okay, or when I was 18. Okay, the world was easier then. It was all black and white, and of course not really easier, but it was simpler to that degree because I was completely dominated, sort of just by judging everything about myself, you know, like you said, based on what happened. But I would always refer to like good me or bad me, you know, like, oh, I was bad, you know, or not good enough. So thank you for sharing this. That you know, for you, it's an instant reflection on multiple levels of yourself, which of course is not a guarantee that we cannot get stuck in our own duality and so forth. I'm sure I didn't hear you say that you never get stuck there, that we can all get stuck.
Oh, I get stuck there all the time. That's why I'm Sacred Self-Healing member.
But there's a sort of a training that you have with yourself, with just also a willingness, you know, to look at things from a different perspective and to look at, okay, what's the connection here? What's the context? Yeah. Sheila's sharing that her observation of her own energy level seems to affect how she sees herself. We just for the precision here, do you mean your energy level, like your physical energy level, or are you actually referring to your energetic state, your energetic perception? That is, you are a member here in this Sacred Self-Healing community for Sheila, I don't know how many years, 5 years, 6 years.
Yeah.
So you have a lot of training. What are you referring to when you say energy?
To me, yeah, to me, it's the actual energetic state that I'm in. It seems to be where I start reflecting on how I see myself. Yeah.
How does this go for you, just as a practical kind of reference here? So let's say something happens in your life and then you reflect on your energy level. How do you do that?
Well, the most helpful thing that has happened to me through this program, especially in all this work, is the differentiation between my stuff and the outer stuff. I never understood how much that affected me. And because inside I felt like I knew who I was, but it got hard to express, and I didn't understand that incongruence. And I have learned that there is so much being, having the sensitivities, how much that really affected me it has been amazing to learn.
So like what is yours and what is not yours, like what you just
correct.
sort of picked,
Yeah.
what you just picked up due to exposure.
Yes.
Let's say you were
Yes.
surrounded by people who were depressed, and then all of a sudden you had no reason, but all of a sudden you felt depressed too, or anxious, or whatever state. So that's a cool learning experience here for all of us. I can see that, once you learn to better differentiate if what is influencing your perception about yourself is even coming from yourself, or if that's coming from random. It can be random too, right? It can be collective.
Right.
I mean,
right. And that's been so huge that, what I've found interesting is with the COVID situation, for example, and being remote, more away from people more than, ever. There can be out of the complete blue, these feelings. So it's really helped me tune into that even more so, because before I got used to being, my work and the places I would work and the situations.
The wear and tear of being in
this
so
right. So I got used to that exhaustion over these 20 plus years. And but being not around that physically, I've learned over the last 6 months that there were times I would be sitting here by myself at my house doing my thing and have this out of blue either anger or this whatever emotion might come in. And then I noticed immediately where it took me and my perception of myself. And I looked around going, there's nobody here. So like, it was the most bizarre experiences. And then I would talk to my mom or other people from this community and find out similar things had been happening to them that day or whatever. So that has honestly been the biggest gift for me. It's such a relief.
Sort of applying a consciousness, that allows us to shift perspectives and create our own consciousness. The COVID situation, the social distancing or the remote work in your particular case, has actually helped you to discern more. Okay, so there's something good about that too, right?
Right.
So this is just an example of how, when we become aware of how certain experiences, certain learning experiences bring new insights for us, how they can actually be empowering or good for us, or how they can make us even feel better about ourselves. I remember the first couple of weeks of lockdown here in the US, here in Florida. I felt like a new person. It was just so quiet, and all I could hear was the birds, and there were no cars on the streets. And I'm like, oh my God, there was no people anywhere. And I felt really good because, like you, there was less of that outer exposure. Okay, so this is a really important point here, that this outer exposure can really mess with how we feel about ourselves. Exposure in the sense of like what we surround ourselves with. And most of you know this already, that we are all part of this collective energy. We can feel this very strongly, say in times of full moon, or when some kind of big current events sort of rush through media, how this can affect the mood, and with the mood, the energy levels, and with the energy levels, also the perception of people. And actually, the entire COVID situation in and of itself is such a phenomenon, because for the first months or so, no one really knew anyone who was infected. So there was a lot of speculation, a lot of these conspiracy theories that it didn't even exist. Remember this, guys? And that is part of, like how our perception can be influenced by outer energies or outer information. Okay, it could have been. It could have been just an invention, a media invention. Okay, that could have been possible. Turns out it wasn't, but I mean, it's real, yeah, but the contextualization, for example, that we have to shut down, that we have to social distance and so forth, those are still things that are controversial. So there's many different perspectives on that. Yeah, thank you, Sheila. Becky is sharing that she realizes that her emotions influence the way she feels about herself the most. Yeah. And I think this is probably the case for all of us, which is why emotional processing and emotional literacy is so important, because once we become a little more aware of how our emotions form, and that it's not sort of something that we can look at as a separate thing. Many of us have this preoccupation that emotionality is something bad. All right, but the truth of it is that our emotions are, as we've learned here from Cheryl's example, that they can be a part of our physiological or physical condition, or they can be part of our mental state and the inner dialogue and the thought processes that we have, or even the spiritual state that we have. So I know this is confusing here. If you look at the complexity of it, like we just did, then we realize how many different factors influence our perception. Yes, Amanda's adding another one, and this is one that has always been really dominating for me as well. Relationships and connections influence the way she feels about us. Same here. If I actually look into my past, I can literally make out different kinds of selves by the different kinds of relationships that I had. I have many different past selves. I don't know if you guys have this too, based on the relationships that I had at the time. Yeah, so we're starting to run out of time. And if we have to, we're just going to do a second part. That's no problem. It's a wonderful discussion and awesome sharing here from you guys. So thank you very much for that. I'm going to speed up a little bit, and if we go over time a bit, I'll try to finish this today, and it will just probably take 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes longer. What is needed, this is clear here now through our discussion, is it's the self-awareness. Okay, so there is no way that we can find any kind of roadmap or compass, any kind of navigation here for our life in the way we perceive ourselves based on all these different factors, external or internal. Really, really difficult to determine, how we're seeing ourselves, and if how we're seeing ourselves is even true or not. And I'm reading, Sandra, I'm reading your text here right now. Sorry, guys, this makes me mute. So today, after seeing an old work colleague who I did not really connect with, and then an hour later or so, I was really hard on yourself with a loud critical inner voice. You caught it, but the reaction was unconscious. Yeah, very good example for this exposure, and very cool that you could catch this, Sandra. That's similar to what Sheila said. In this case, you could identify that this was clearly something that relates to the interaction with this person, and maybe this person was very disconnected, and this can also then sort of rub off. And so can our disconnect rub off to others. Okay, so this is always a two-way. It's a multiple way of interaction here. Okay, it's never just one way. So self-awareness, and I called it cultivating present moment awareness. So we talked or mentioned this earlier. Present moment awareness, just short PMA. I don't know if that's a standing abbreviation, but it makes this typing so long. It's the ability to consciously shift my awareness into the now, at will, into the now. All right. So, and then that can then allow me to do what we did earlier here, describe how we're feeling, describe what our state is. And, if we train this a little bit, if we take enough space for doing that, we can very precisely determine what is affecting our perception at a time. Empathy, we've mentioned this a few times here as well, is the ability to shift my perspective and to relate to the emotions, reactions, and energies of others and myself. I want to add here, I can also, I saw this here in your guys' sharings, that you showed a lot of empathy for yourself. Okay, so there's obviously there's a different version of yourself that can observe yourself. Can you guys follow me here? So there's different parts of us that can do this observation. And earlier I distinguished this between experiencing. This would be where we are caught in the experience. We are, seeing or sensing a phenomenon, and it triggers something in us, and then you guys use the word stuck. We can get stuck in that, and we are just the experience, that we're completely overrun by the experience. All right, then the observer is the one in us here, the part in us, the self in us, that can sort of go into this self-aware place, where we look at it now. Okay, the present moment awareness about the now, and we observe it. Okay, so we observe the experiencer in us. And then there is another way of looking at ourselves, and that is the witnesser. And the witnesser uses empathy to experience, and this observer self to observe. Okay, so the witnesser is the experiencer and the observer at the same time. And that's then what leads to consciousness. This is what is needed to train our consciousness. So consciousness is the product of continual present moment awareness, and with it the ability to consciously shift my awareness into truth at will, into truth in the sense of like really looking at how it is. And there's a problem with this that we've also discovered already, that if we look back at how we saw things yesterday or this morning, or 10 years ago, well, we realized the way we saw it back then was different than we see it right now. And usually we can see the limitation of how we saw it back then, because somehow in the course of our life we seem to accumulate more experiences, more observations, more insights. Our consciousness grows. We can see larger quantities. We can change perspectives more easily, and we understand today that how we saw things yesterday may have been a little limited. So here, this quote that I bring a lot of times in energy tips and articles: if we knew better, we'd do better. But in order to know better, we need to understand first. And to understand better, we need to connect within and allow divine consciousness to dissolve the limitations of ego, so that we can begin to understand what our ego cannot. Okay, so that we can understand what our ego cannot know. This relates to limited perception, namely the perception of a specific event, experience, or observation that is biased sort of through the frame of reference that we have. And unfortunately, we've already discovered this. Here, there's a lot of issues when it comes to self-perception. Namely, our self-image is kind of tied to this. Our self-image is determined by how we want to see, or how I want to see myself, and how I think others see me. Abigail shared something in regards to this, so that there's a part of us that wants to see ourselves in a certain way, or wants others to see us in a certain way, and that then determines our actions, our thoughts, our emotions, how we feel about ourselves. Then there's something like identity. Okay, that's a step up from self-image, of what we perceive as measurable skills, knowledge, abilities, and what we approve of. Okay, so there's a bias to that contribute to us feeling good about ourselves. Okay, this is what identity is. So we will not really adopt an identity that we do not like. That's the compartment of shadow self. Okay, this is where we file all the things about ourselves that we don't like, and from a psychological point of view, we typically suppress that or dissociate from it. That's a big part of this inner fragmentation, and ultimately why we feel so disconnected, because there are parts in us that we label and compartmentalize, and that does not allow us to feel unified. That does not allow us to feel whole, and hence we have a lot of inner incongruencies and misalignments. Now, we had the word competency here. This is the part where we feel, that we can handle things. Okay, this is the combination of practical, measurable knowledge, skills, abilities, and personal attributes that give us the impression that we have the enhanced ability to deal with reality, that then sort of leads to success in life. That's what makes us feel competent. Okay. Now, adequacy is a different version of that. That is the trust in one's competency, and thus the ability to actually deal with challenges, changes, and new perspectives without experiencing a negative impact on the self-image. So competency is something that informs us about, who we are, what we can do, what we can handle. It can be idealized, as we found out already, but it makes us feel good about ourselves. Adequacy also makes us feel good about ourselves. That means, we can apply all this, and we can trust in it no matter what. We can accept changes as part of life, and therefore feel adequate. Someone who doesn't feel adequate, inadequacy, which is something that we discuss quite frequently here in the Sacred Self-Healing community, does not trust in their own competency. So energy awareness is also a component of our self-perception, and dimension of our different selves here can help me to better understand and address an emotional, physical, mental, or energetic state before it can control me. in your guys' sharings, you reported about this. You are obviously in training, so you know, energy awareness is ultimately what allows you to do this, to literally catch things before they can latch on, before you get stuck. So how do we do this? How do we train this? What is the process of self-discovery that allows us to explore these different aspects of self? I mean, before we can discern them all, we kind of have to know what all these different parts are. And why is this important? Because it's part of our self-mastery, the ultimate sort of control over what we manifest. It's here at number one as a pillar of self-mastery. So the gray parts here: self-management, social awareness, relationship management, and energy awareness. I want to fade this out because we're not talking about this here right now. We have other workshops where we talked about this already. So self-awareness happens through self-discovery, which ultimately leads to self-healing. It's fundamentally, you know, this idea of knowing ourselves so that we can better learn to choose, you know, what we want to embody and really how we experience our higher self. So knowing ourselves allows us to discern better, even if it's just the ability to discern when we're not really connected with our higher self. There are various models out there, guys. Here in the self-discovery topic slide, I already brought this in. This is something that's very popular amongst success coaches, and especially in career counseling, career coaching, is the discovery insights, the color energies, to look at yourself from 4 different perspectives, kind of like the 4 elements. It's quite natural here for energetically aware people to feel aligned to some of the energies that come with water, with fire, with earth, and with sun. And it helps to break this down a little bit. I like it, okay, and I often do this. The point here of showing you this is that when we are having a good day, when we feel good about ourselves, then these aspects of ourselves, and we all have different aptitudes, so we all gravitate towards you know, different kinds of we have different tendencies, if you will. In staffing, they call it personality types. Myers-Briggs, you've all, I'm sure, all made one of these personality tests online or whatever. Here it's a little less judgmental, but it ultimately allows us to see that there's a positive, that there's a really good expression of something, and on a bad day, obviously, this can then go lopsided, go out of balance, and go into the negative expression. I don't want to go deeper into this, but here too, you will see that you know, ultimately it's about bringing all of this together and recognizing that there's a lot of different shades, and that there's a lot of different things that are needed to feel whole and to feel like you are in that sort of self-mastery place with yourself. But you have to go through the self-reflection and self-awareness process of discovering who you are, so that you even know what your talents, your skills, your medicine is. If you try to be someone else, like say you're a very introvert, or you're a very you know, empathetic person, okay, to trying to be someone who is a goal-getter and sort of a more fiery person would not be authentic. That would create a lot of inner confliction and contradiction in you. And that's why it's so important to use the self-awareness to move away from these idealized versions of ourselves to these versions that are reflecting who we truly are, just per our disposition. But we can always change this later, and that's then really part of our consciousness development, that we recognize, okay, the parts that we would like to increase a little more, that we would like to balance out a little more. And that's then ultimately the process of self-healing, so that we can, you know, really grow into and embody our highest potential. What is our higher potential? Well, it's different for everyone, but I can tell you what it's not. We're not defined or restricted by our potential, by these aptitudes, but by the choices we make. It's a very, very deep statement. And when we zoom through these next slides here, you will see that the word conscious and choice are almost in every slide. So what we can already at this point summarize here is that who we want to act as, who we want to show up as, and to a certain degree also how the world responds to me and how other people see me, depends on my conscious choice. The choice to embody who experiences this life, this world. We're getting into the different versions, all these different selves now, and we would have to rush through them. Would you prefer to do a second part and take a little more time with the differentiation? Okay, this is the majority of you get. This is like the overwhelming majority. Okay, guys, then let's finish part 1 here with this statement that our highest potential is not defined or restricted by our, well, original potential, our aptitude or predisposition, but by the choices we make. That's a beautiful statement to reflect. And then let's meet again to discuss all these different versions of self that you saw here at the very beginning, and how they interact with another and how we can discern them. Heather mentioned something about leveling up and so forth. We'll discuss that as well, if that's really a leveling or if it's just a different layer, a different version of self-expression, perhaps a more conscious choice of whom we want to act as. Yes, Sandra, thank you. So we will explore all this in the second part. With the recording, you'll get the link and the time and the day for the second part. See you guys very soon. Thank you all for coming. Love you. Bye-bye.